Hello, college football fans, and welcome once again to the SEC Yesterday and Today, episode 16. And I'm your host, Byrd LaCroix. Of course, we're going to talk about all things Southeastern Conference today, but we are going to focus specifically on the game between Auburn and LSU to take place Saturday afternoon at 3:30 Eastern Time at Jordan-Hare Stadium in Auburn, Alabama. And that game will be broadcast on CBS. The Auburn Tigers are a 10.5-point favorite in that game. But before we go on to have our special guest on today and talk about that specific game and make some predictions for you, we're going to give you a little series history between Auburn and LSU. LSU has 29 wins in this series. Auburn has 22 wins. One game has ended in a tie. Auburn's largest margin of victory occurred in both the years 1999 and 2014. Auburn won both of those games 41-7, their largest margin of victory. LSU's largest margin of victory, 45-10 in the year 2011. Auburn's longest winning streak in the series, 4 games. Those occurred between the years 1989 and 1994. LSU's longest winning streak occurred between the years 1926 and 1937, a 6-game winning streak for the Bayou Bengals, and a little more about these two storied programs' college football history. Auburn has won 761 games, lost 436 games, and tied 47 games for a .631 winning percentage in its history. LSU has won 789 games, lost 412 games, and also tied 47 games for a .651 winning percentage. That's good enough for 14th all-time in college football history. Auburn is 19th all-time in college football history. Auburn claims 3 national championships. LSU claims 4 national championships. Auburn has won 12 conference championships. LSU has won 14 conference championships. The Auburn Tigers have played in 42 bowl games with a bowl record of 23, 17, and 2. LSU has played in 49 bowl games with a bowl record of 25, 23, and 1. Auburn counts 30 consensus All-Americans. That is 23rd of all college football programs. LSU, 32 consensus All-Americans over the years. Auburn has 3 Heisman winners, and you know who they are most probably: Pat Sullivan, Bo Jackson, and Cam Newton. LSU's lone Heisman winner was Billy Cannon. Auburn has 30 first-round NFL draft picks over the years. LSU has 41 NFL draft picks. And now, let's get on to the talk, and we're going to bring out our special guest, Jordan Campbell. Jordan is a radio host on Fox 97.9 Shoals Sports Talk in Florence, Alabama. And he's also a Friday Night Lights kind of guy doing some game casting on that same radio station for high school football. And so we welcome to the show today, Jordan Campbell. Hello, Jordan, and welcome to the SEC Yesterday and Today. It's great to have you with us.
Glad to be on, Byrd. You know, I have you on my radio show all the time, try to during football season, but I'm glad I get to join you on your turf.
I am very glad about that, and we just get to be 2 guys talking football, and we're going to focus primarily on Auburn and LSU this week. And this is episode 16 of the SEC Yesterday and Today, by the way. And we're also going to pick some other SEC games. But again, our focus is what I consider the biggest game in the country, even though Game Day decided to do Ohio State and TCU. We're going to look at Auburn and LSU, both teams highly ranked. Auburn in the inside the top 10 at number 7, and LSU coming in at number 12, right outside of the top 10. And it's going to be another one of those monster games on CBS. And let's just get right into it. And first of all, Jordan, I'll ask you, if you don't mind giving me your impressions of LSU in the first 2 games they've played.
Well, you know, LSU looked really good against Miami, and I'll be honest with you, Byrd. I thought last year, I know Miami is now, 0-4 in their last 4 games, but I thought last year, I'm not going to say the U is back, but the U was on the freeway. They were on their way back, and then things sort of went off the rails a little bit. So I don't think it's fair to say that LSU made a statement against a team who's and at that time was 0-4 over the last 4 games. I don't think it's safe to say they made a statement, but they did impress simply because our perceptions of LSU before the season started were, in my mind anyway, that Miami was going to come out, that defensive front was going to shut them down. We didn't know what they had at running back because we haven't seen Brissett. You never know what they're going to have at quarterback. I mean, heck, They had 2 guys transfer. I knew they were going to have an okay receiving core. Giles comes over from Texas Tech, and you know as well as I do, their defense is always going to be strong and fast, led by Devin White. But still, I didn't believe in Coach Orgeron, and I still don't know if I do, but it was an impressive victory over Miami. The thing is, we've got to watch to see how Miami goes the rest of the year to actually look back on week 1 and say that was an impressive win because Miami is a good team.
Yeah, they said they should be a good team. Now, the skid has you wondering. Mark Richt started off, maybe like 8-0 or something like that, 9-0, and then I think they lost their next 4, and then they've bounced back last week. But again, I'm with you on that too. I don't think Miami they were top 10 ranked before the season, and it appears to be too high. And I don't know if they'll be able to give Clemson any grief at all in the ACC, but we'll find out. And LSU is some interesting things. Now that we were talking about LSU, the offense hasn't been overwhelming. The defense is typical LSU defense. You mentioned White and Greedy Williams, but the offense, even though Brissett has rushed for over 100 yards in 2 games, and by the way, I got a stat here for that. Under Orgeron, LSU is 13-0 when it has a 100-yard rusher. So we got to watch that.
Right.
We don't want Brissett to get that 100 yards. But LSU hasn't been overly impressive in its overall statistics combined in its first 2 ball games, even though they beat Miami handily, and then of course they had some few struggles because I think it was the level of competition they were playing against Southeastern Louisiana. But Southeastern Louisiana, they even got more first downs than LSU, and in some ways played pretty well. So now that we come up to the Auburn game, it's going to really be interesting to see what goes on. Now, you mentioned 100-yard rushers. LSU being 13-0 when they have a 100-yard rusher under Orgeron. Both Booby Whitlow and Sean Shivers ran for over 100 yards this past Saturday night, Jordan. And Auburn is 12-0 when it has 2 guys rush for over 100. So if you don't mind, talk a little about the Auburn running attack and how you see that going this year, and the O-line and so forth.
Coming into this season, I think when you look at Auburn's offense, you knew where you had things you were confident in. Obviously, Jarrett Stidham, a Heisman candidate, potential first, second-round draft pick in the NFL. You knew he was going to be talented. We didn't have to worry about that. You also knew that he had all his receivers back, at least the guys who made statements. Ryan Davis, Eli Stove, though he was injured, he got to playing time against Alabama State. Darius Slayton. So you knew that their wide receiving core, the guys that he was going to be getting the ball to on the outside and up the field, were going to be fine. Mm-hmm. I think your biggest question marks were that offensive line as well as the running backs. Now, Gus Malzahn's a guy, he typically likes to find one workhorse running back and run him until the wheels fall off.
Doesn't he though?
Exactly. A la Kerryon Johnson, a la Trey Mason. That's the kind of coach that he is, and that is what has produced successfully for him. This year is going to be more of the old school from what I'm thinking, from what I've seen. It's going to be more of the old school Ronnie Brown, Cadillac Williams type, with Whitlow and Cam Martin being the 2 guys switching back and forth. With that being said, if one guy does emerge from what I've seen through the first couple games, it's going to be Booby Whitlow. He just looks more like the guy that Gus wants at that running back position to this point. Now, I'm not saying Cam Martin can't do it. Cam Martin's got talent, but when you look at what Booby Whitlow brings to the table, being able to run over guys, being able to run through the tackles, I think that's what Gus Malzahn likes. It'll be interesting to see what Gus decides to do, if he does try and stick with a true 2 running back system, or if one guy does emerge and gets, the lion's share of the carries as the season goes along. So that's where the running back position is. I'm not really as concerned about the running back position now as I was to begin the season. Gus said he wanted to come out against Alabama State and establish the run. They did that. I know they had some turnovers, but they did go out and establish the run. I think they had 430 yards of offense running the football, something like that. So I think they're going to be okay there. That offensive line was a totally different story. Now they're dealing with a couple injuries, which didn't Jack Driscoll go down, I believe?
He did, and I just looked at Gus's presser, and he said everybody is practicing and everybody should be ready. But Driscoll was dinged up, yeah.
Good deal. So they've got Driscoll back. He was banged up a little bit. It'll be interesting to see how LSU decides to attack him if they decide to bring more pressure on Driscoll, trying to capitalize on what they know to be at least a tender spot for him. I think this offensive line, obviously they lost a lot of talent off of last year. They're going to continue to get better. With this offensive line, the thing that I'm most concerned about is confidence, knowing that they can do the job. I think they got confidence against Washington. I think it only enhanced against Alabama State. I think the O-line's going to be okay. No, it's not as good as it was last year, and they're also not blocking for a Kerryon Johnson guy. Boobie Whitlow, Cam Martin, neither one of those guys has stepped up in my mind and said, yeah, we're as good as Kerryon. But I think they're going to do the job. I think Auburn's going to be able to establish the run. I just don't know if they're going to have to establish it trying to go around the ends, trying to go around the tight end, or the tight end or the blocking back or the left tackle, right tackle, or if they're going to be able to establish it up the middle with Devin White standing there and a host of other LSU defenders. So it's going to be interesting. Gus wants to run the football. He always has wanted to run the football, and he's going to try and run it. The question is, can the line, can the running backs get enough push where they can do it successfully against LSU? I hope they can, but hope isn't a definite, it's not a definite thing.
No, it's not a definite thing, and this line as it continues to get better and communicate and trust each other and develop some chemistry, I think they will be fine. I think they have great potentially. Yes, but J.B. Grimes is a great line coach, and he's one of the most highly thought of offensive line coaches in the country, and he's a master at teaching technique and fundamentals, and of course that's what they're going to have to do to open the holes for the running backs. And I think it was, now thinking about Auburn and LSU, the only game Auburn lost in Gus's first year, if I recall right, that was Trey Mason's breakout game, wasn't it?
It may have been, yeah.
And so you're looking now, you're getting into game 3, you're starting to find yourself, you're beginning to understand your identity and who you are as a team. So it was interesting you mentioned the Boobie Whitlow, because that great touchdown run he made against Washington was very impressive, showing how he can go right up the gut. Great call by Chip Lindsey. And like you said, Cam, Cam's obviously got the talent. He's got some breakaway. He's the guy that can take it to the house. But let me tell you, those two guys that did rush for over 100, Sean Shivers and Boobie Whitlow. Sean was really amazing, a little guy at about 5, 6, or 7, 175 pounds. And also one of the things I'd been hoping for to see, we got to see Anthony Swartz on the jet sweep. So talk just a minute about Shivers and Anthony Swartz and any other of these true freshmen like Matthew Hill or Seth Williams that come to mind, if you want to, Jordan.
Well, I think it was some valuable experience by those guys getting to play against Alabama State, an in-state, and not a rival, but an in-state competitor. And anytime you get to play a team within your state, guys that you might have played against in high school, anything like that, that's special. I think when you look at what these guys did against Alabama State, the biggest takeaway in my mind is the experience that they got. Look, Shivers, though he's talented, he's not, barring an injury to Martin or Whitlow, he's probably not going to be the guy that's called on to carry the ball just a ton this year. Neither is Asa Martin. Neither is Harold Joyner. But those guys got game action. They know what it's like to get into a college game and try and produce. Anthony Swartz, I think it's safe to say his speed is as good as advertised, right? We could say that. And so,
he ran about, but the touchdown pass, my goodness, he gets downfield.
He's fast.
There's a story from practice a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if you heard it, but Stidham threw a long pass down the sideline to Swartz, and before he even saw what happened, he turned around and was disgusted with himself, and he didn't even look to see that in spite of him thinking he had overthrown it 30 yards, Swartz ran under it and scored a touchdown.
Right.
So that's exciting to me. That kind of, I mean, we're talking literally world-class speed. And I think if there's one word, I mean, Auburn's going to be tough and they're going to hit you. They're going to play Auburn football. But I think as you see Gus continue to build this team, speed is really one of the most important things. And he has done it in spades on both sides of the ball. Don't you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. You know, you think about Schwartz, and that's the guy we look at because he is, I mean, he's a sprinter. They've got a couple of sprinters who play football for them down at Auburn. But you just see this guy. You look at a defender, a secondary guy, a defensive back. Now, Schwartz is just a freshman, so, yeah, he's going to get in there from time to time, and against some of these throwaway games, he'll make some statements. But if you had to put him in there, you know, let's say you're playing against, I don't know, throw an SEC opponent out there who's at the bottom. It doesn't matter. But they're beating them pretty handily. But you're still playing an SEC defense. Right. I don't know a lot of defensive backs. Once he gets past you or makes a cut, I don't know any secondary guys who are going to be able to catch back up with him. And you love to have a guy, when you've got a strong arm quarterback like Jarrett Stidham, you love to have him throwing the guys who he cannot outrun or who you can't overthrow. And that's what you've got in Anthony Schwartz. It's going to be hard for any quarterback to overthrow him, and you've got to love it. The question now is, can the quarterbacks get it out there far enough where they're not throwing behind him? And right now they've got a guy who can. Now Willis and Sandberg and Gatewood, we'll see in the future if those guys have the same type arm talent that Jarrett Stidham has. But, yeah, he was impressive. He's fast, and you love to see that.
Okay, I'm going to give you a stat, and then I'm going to ask you a question about that. We're talking about Stidham and he's been able to get ball. You know, he can make some throws that are incredible, and he can put it on the money. And speaking of putting it on the money, this is the stat I had. Stidham's passing percentage overall at Auburn is now .667, which is first all time at Auburn. Cam Newton is second with .661. And I found that pretty darn interesting. I knew he was accurate, but doggone, he is really, you know, he's putting it where he's supposed to. Now, that being said, you think of some games last year, like LSU in particular, that Stidham has said is the game that propelled them to re-examine themselves and be able to push to the SEC championship. As a matter of fact, he said he thought if Auburn had beaten LSU, that they might not have even played in the SEC championship game. So that's interesting. But how he had to run for his life in that game against Georgia in the SEC championship game, and getting sacked several times and getting sacked 11 times at Clemson, his accuracy is still what it is. It's oftentimes with him running for his life. So I think as he and Chip Lindsey continue to work together in year two, and Stidham's able to now check off, and they've turned him loose, as Chip and Gus said about him. I think it's really it's going to be a fun thing to watch to see how Stidham does wind up the season. And we just hope he stays healthy and is able to do that.
Absolutely.
Now talking about the lines, when we get down to where the water meets the wheel in this game with Auburn versus LSU, here's the matchup that I like. Well, I think Auburn is better than LSU, and we'll talk about it, who we think might win and how or by how much in just a little bit. But I really like our D-line versus their O-line. I like that matchup. I think they've got a guy coming back today, Saturday, that didn't play this past Saturday, so that's going to help them a little bit, and they have another backup guy that's going to play. But I think LSU's a big SEC football team. They got big, strong guys, but Auburn's front four is arguably one of the best, if not the best, in the country. So what do you tell me? Talk a little bit about that matchup, if you would.
Yeah, Auburn's front seven really are – I don't know if I want to say underrated, because we know how talented they are, but most people are going to look towards Clemson's front four. They're going to look at some other places and say that's the best. I would put Auburn right up there with any of them. And, yeah, you're exactly right, Bird. I like this matchup for Auburn. I like the tenacity that they have, especially with Deshaun Davis playing linebacker, sort of directing traffic back there. You know, at SEC Media Days, I was doing some research, and Kevin Steele actually said, look, I could give Deshaun Davis the defense and let him be the defensive coordinator and call plays, and he could just do just as good of a job as I would. That's how much faith they have in this young man. So when you've got a signal caller on the field like Deshaun Davis behind those linemen, he's going to see things before they ever happen. That's just the type of talent he is. Yeah. And when you think about up front for Auburn, I mean, they've got a lot of talented guys. obviously, so many guys come to mind. You think about Nick Coe, he's really having some breakout play early on in the year. Dontavius Russell's a guy that you know what you're going to get. Marlon Davidson. So I like this front four for Auburn, and I think they will be able to get pressure. And it's not as much to me stopping the run of Brissett. I think they'll do a pretty good job of doing that. It's getting pressure on Joe Burrow and making him uncomfortable. Burrow has looked impressive through 2 games for LSU at the quarterback spot. He really has. But we've got to remember, this is a guy who couldn't stick it at Ohio State, and I'm not saying that that's an easy school to stick it as the quarterback. But he transferred out of Ohio State, comes down to LSU, and wins the job. And he's had some successful games, but they've been, I guess it's safe to say, Danny Etling-esque in the way that he's gone about it. When you look at LSU, he's only thrown 5.8 through 2 games. It's like 5.8 yards per attempt. So it's not like he's chunking it 25 yards down the field every time he throws the football. So Joe Burrow and LSU is going to try and get the snaps out very quickly, a lot in my mind like Derek Carr did last night against the Rams. 1, 2 balls out of there. So Auburn's going to have to quickly get there, but that also puts pressure on the secondary. I do think that this front four for Auburn is going to be able to get a lot of pressure on Burrow. I think they're going to clog up the holes when Brissett wants to run. And to me, when you look at it, it's ball security and special teams may come down to making the difference in this one. I think Auburn will move the football, and I think LSU will move the football. It just may be in ways that I'm not expecting for LSU. And maybe it's going to be in ways I'm not expecting for Auburn too. But I think LSU and Steve Ensminger, I think they're going to come up with some creative things because they know how talented that front 7 is for Auburn. That's tough. That's a tough front 7 for anybody to face.
Yeah, it's amazingly tough. And you mentioning Burrow, his completion percentage is 47%. He's 21 for 44. So he's not he's not setting the woods on fire as far as his accuracy is concerned. And also LSU is in the bottom half of the country in sacks allowed. Right. And then talking about that D-line and really the front 7, as you mentioned, how strong it is, that doesn't bode well for Burrow. And I think he's going to run for his life. You look at the strong team, the senior-laden offensive line Washington had, and the guy, his name escapes me right now, Jake Browning. Jake Browning was running for his life, and he got sacked several times. So I think it'll be even more so, even though you had getting into the game now to build your confidence and chemistry a little bit. I think it could be a long afternoon for Joe Burrow. And so while we're heading in that way, that direction, let's just go ahead and push it toward a prediction. And if there are there's one other thing that stands out to me here. This Jonathan Giles that came over from Texas Tech is supposed to be the playmaker on their team. They gave him number 7, who oftentimes LSU gives number 7 to the guy who they think might be the biggest playmaker on the team. Well, the guy's caught 2 passes, 42 yards. And so somebody's going to have to step up. Again, you take into the competition, particularly the second week, but they are going to have to do a lot of improvement if they want to stand a chance against Auburn. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, Jonathan Giles comes over from Texas Tech. I think he had, over 1,000 yards receiving, right at 1,000 yards receiving last year.
Oh, he lit it, yeah.
Yeah, he was really, really talented for the Red Raiders. And you're exactly right. They want to get him the football, and he can be the playmaker. But the question is, you can't. How do you get him the football if Burrow's not going to throw it down the field? He's not going to rack up 100 yards games catching 3-yard slants. He's not Odell Beckham. He's not going to catch him and just outrun everybody. It's not going to happen. No. So yeah, if he is their playmaker, which I think he has the talent to be, you got to figure out a way to get him a ball in a way that he can make a play. That's exactly what a playmaker is. And against Auburn, I don't know if Burrow is going to be able to. Like you said, Washington's offensive line, big, strong, and experienced, and we still saw Jake Browning running for his life. LSU has a few questions on that offensive line. Burrow's been okay. I think he's been good enough for what they want to do. Brissett has really sort of helped them out. Not really. He's been the guy that's kept them beating Miami and moving the ball and stuff like that. So you take a look at Jonathan Giles, you know what type of talent he has, and you say, I think it's safe to say, man, his talent is being wasted right now because they can't get him the football in a way that allows him to make the plays he needs to be able to make.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so with that, let's just move right on into our prediction time, and I'll let you take it and how you see this game going. And if you'd like to give a score, whatever, just give us your thoughts on the outcome of this game Saturday at Auburn.
Well, I opened up the show, Bird. We were talking about how good is LSU really. You can't tell because they played a Miami team that I think got overhyped a little bit last year. They were on a losing streak coming in. They lost to LSU. They did not look impressive by any stretch of the imagination. And then they played Southeastern Louisiana State this past week. And really, yeah, they beat them. But, I mean, anybody could have beat them if you're wearing an LSU jersey. So this is going to be, to me, and I think we'll look back 6-7 weeks into the season at how Miami is doing, and we'll know how talented or how impressive that win was for LSU over them. But I think this is going to be the toughest test, and I'll be honest with you, Bird, I don't think it's going to be a test they're going to pass. There's a lot of question marks for LSU, probably coming down in my mind from the top. I love Coach Orgeron. I love his personality. I love interviews with him, but he's not a head coach. He's just not. I would be surprised if he's still a head man at LSU after this season. About the only way he's going to do it is if he beats Auburn and Alabama. He's not going to do both. He's not going to do both of those in the same year. So you take a look at this one. I think Auburn's going to come out early, try and establish the run to set up the play action pass, and I think they will have success. I think they'll have to be wary of Greedy Williams, where he is. Which wide receiver is he going to cover? Which wide receivers he's going to stick on? Is it going to be Davis? Is it going to be Stowe? Who's it going to be? And you stick away from that guy. That's the beauty of Auburn's wide receiving core. You've got a lot of different guys that Stidham is confident in throwing the football to. I think that this game is probably what did you say the line was on this one? You told me before.
10.5. Auburn's 10.5.
10.5. I think that's a pretty good line. I don't bet, but if I did, I would probably take Auburn in this one well over that. I think that this game is probably going to be quite a bit higher than 10.5 points in favor of Auburn. I mean, you're playing in Jordan-Hare, one of the most hostile environments in the country, not just the SEC, in the country, with a first-year starting quarterback in Joe Burrow, with a first-year starting running back, and an inexperienced offensive line. I mean, you know as well as I do, Bird, when you get Jordan-Hare rocking, it is impossible to hear. And this isn't the NFL. They don't have a speaker coming in there to Burrow's headset to tell him what to do and when to change the plays. I think LSU is going to come into an environment that they are not prepared for, and I think you're going to see that at the end of the game. If I were to give a score prediction on this one, I would probably look at Auburn 45, LSU. LSU's going to score in some way. Maybe it's on special teams. Maybe it's on defense. I don't know. 45-21, maybe. I think that's probably a pretty reasonable score. But with that being said, those 21 points, I don't think you can look at the defense and say, you guys gave up 21 points that you shouldn't have. I think it's going to be a hard-earned 21 points. Maybe they get a fumble recovery in Auburn territory that they only got to go 5, 10 yards, 15 yards for. Maybe they, have a big punt return where they start in great field position. But I don't think they're going to take the ball at at their own 2 and march it 98 yards down the field with no hesitation, no pressure at all. I think it's going to be a hard-earned 21 points or so for LSU, but I think it's going to be tough for them to catch up with and keep Auburn down. They've got some talented players in Greedy and Devin White, but 2 guys can't stop 11. You and I both know that, Bird.
Oh, yeah, I think I'm in 100% agreement with you. And I like Auburn's matchups. We mentioned the lines, the ball. You win ball games in the SEC. You win ball games anywhere in the trenches. I think Auburn will be able to run. I think they will be able to stop the run. And I do think they'll be able to throw. And I think Auburn's hungry. I think even though they say, well, last year doesn't matter, but that's got to stick in their craw, even if they do think it propelled them to the SEC championship game. And I've got Auburn winning by something like 30-13.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable score too. Either one of those are going to be close. 30-13, maybe a little bit more credit to the defense than I'm giving them. I don't want Brissett to be able to move the football, but through 2 games he has. The question mark is, though, how good was Miami? We obviously know how good Southeastern Louisiana State is. That was a throwaway game for him. So I think Brissett will move the ball 60, 70 yards, which is pretty decent against an Auburn defense that's as talented as he is. If he can get that, that's impressive to me.
Well, Myles Gaskin got 76,
right.
So
yeah,
I'll give you a comparison. But, let's move on to the others. And just a brief who's going to win it. And if there is a comment you'd like to make, let's go to Oxford, Mississippi, where the Rebels host Alabama. Jordan.
Thinking about this one, Bird, and I was on a podcast last night and we talked about this ball game. I'm excited about this ball game, not because I care who wins. Look, I don't care who wins. I mean, I lie. I do want Ole Miss to win just because I'm an Auburn fan. You know how it goes, Bird. But
I know exactly.
Yeah, you know how it goes. But you take a look at this one. This is going to be the biggest test to date for Alabama on their defensive side. You and I both know Alabama's secondary is new. They're learning. They're still trying to figure a few things out. And Jordan Ta'amu has the best receiving core in college football. I don't care what you want to say to throw the ball.
A.J. Brown.
And Metcalf and all that. Those guys are good. They're going to move the football. I think this game, Bird, is going to be I don't want to call it a shootout, but I think there's going to be a lot of points scored because I'm telling you, Ole Miss will move the football, but they couldn't stop you and me lining up on the offensive side. They could not stop water if they had a napkin. So I think
Southern Illinois gets how many points,
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. Ole Miss can move the football. They're not playing SEC football right now. They're playing Big 12 football, throwing it all over the place. But that's what they've got to do to win ball games. I don't think Ole Miss can win it because I think Alabama will come up with a couple stops. But I do think that there'll be 60 combined points in this. I wouldn't be surprised if there's 60 combined points.
Yeah, I didn't look at the over/under. I hadn't. I just saw a brief notice on the Auburn message board about the line had come out for all of the different games, and I don't know what the over/under is, but I'd sure take over 60.
Definitely, 100%,
absolutely. And then now here's an interesting one. Florida is a 19-point favorite over Colorado State, who had some big struggles in their first two games before they pulled out a win last Saturday against our Western Division colleagues, the Arkansas Razorbacks. Mike Bobo and his team, 19-point underdogs in the swamp, Jordan.
Yeah, I think that's probably pretty accurate. Colorado State has had a rough go of it to start the year. We anticipate Colorado State to be one of the better non-conference matchups for some of these teams because they have in the past had a really good offense, but they have not looked good through two games. And look, when you're facing a pissed-off Florida team who lost to Kentucky, look, I would hate to be a Colorado State Ram this week. I'll say that.
I hear you, and I'm in 100% agreement there. And we move on to West Lafayette, Indiana, where the Purdue Boilermakers host the Missouri Tigers, one of my dark horse teams. Well, I'll go ahead and tell you, Georgia, anybody that hadn't fallen and hitting their head knows Georgia's going to win the East. But I think Missouri's going to make a little noise, and they go up to play Purdue, Jordan.
Yeah, coming into this one, there were a couple teams that you looked at that were very offensive heavy. One was Ole Miss, and one was Missouri. There were a couple other teams. I think Missouri coming to a shootout with just about anybody in the country, I like, because Drew Lock is a first-round talent at quarterback. They've got some big, strong receivers. They've got a really good tight end. Their defense, I don't know if it's any better or any worse than Ole Miss's, but really and truly, neither one of them has been just extremely impressive to me throughout the first couple weeks of the season. I think that Mizzou wins this ball game. I don't know by how much. Purdue has surprised a few people, I think, a little bit at times over the past couple seasons. But I really think the SEC is going to show out in this one.
I do too. And there we are on the same page once again. My guess is we will be in this fifth and final game that we'll pick for this week, September 15th. Vanderbilt goes to South Bend, Indiana. Vanderbilt winning by an average score of 39-9 in their first two games against the Fighting Irish. What do you think?
I heard somewhere where somebody said Vandy Notre Dame, this might be an upset alert. I can't remember who said it, but I don't think they were thinking. Look, Vandy they started off last year pretty hot too. 3-0 before they faced Alabama and things sort of went off the rails. They're 2-0 this year. They are improved. Their defense looks a lot better, but they've played MTSU and Nevada. I think it's safe to say neither one of those two teams is going to be right there at the end of the season for the college football playoff. Notre Dame might be. I like Vandy. I want Vandy to be really good. I do, but it's Notre Dame. It's Brian Kelly, and no matter how I feel about Brian Kelly, when Notre Dame's good, they're good. When they're bad, they're bad. But when they're good, they're good. And I know that's cliche, and people are like, well, duh, that makes sense. But this is a Notre Dame team that's good, and Notre Dame's good is national championship worthy. Vandy's good probably isn't. I don't think that this is going to be a very close game, though I wish it would be. I think Notre Dame takes control of it from the early set and really make a statement here, trying to put away an SEC foe. Hopefully I'll be pleasantly surprised and Vandy will keep it close or, maybe pull the upset. But look, I'll say this. I'm not a betting man, but if I was, I'm staying really far away from this one because really there's only two outcomes in my mind, Bird. There's a there's a Notre Dame blowout and there's a Vandy upset by 1 or 2 points. I don't think it's going to be, Vandy loses by 5 or Vandy loses by 7. No, if Vandy loses, I think it'll be Vandy loses by 28.
Yeah, Vanderbilt's a 14.5 point underdog, and they should be, maybe by even more. And I agree with you going up to South Bend. I know they're going to be excited. I kind of like what Derek Mason has done. He's just got, he's got the deck stacked against him. You got Kyle Shermer, a senior quarterback who can do some things, but they don't have Ralph Webb. But this transfer, I don't remember his name, the guy that just came over to Vanderbilt, ran the heck out of the ball.
Vaughn.
Thank you. This past Saturday. So I think they'll go up there with a lot of passion, enthusiasm, hopefully play fundamentally sound. But in the end, I mean, Notre Dame's going to pull away and they're going to win the football game by a pretty comfortable margin, I would think.
Yeah, I think so too. I think we're in agreement there. And like I say, I would love for Vandy to come out and make a statement and shut down Brian Kelly, because nobody wants to see Notre Dame win unless you're a Notre Dame fan, right?
Right. That is generally the case. You love them or you hate them.
Exactly.
And I've even struggled when Notre Dame and Alabama play each other. That's tough.
It is, man.
You don't know which way to go. So, well, I think I'll just have a drink, sit back, and watch a football game. Well, I wish we could talk all afternoon, because it has been great fun talking to you, Jordan, and I really appreciate you coming on the show. And if you would, tell people where they can find you out there.
All right, I host a 2-hour radio show on Fox Sports Shoals Monday through Friday. It comes on at 4 o'clock, and you can hang out with me and my co-host Chuck. And I'm on Twitter at CamOnAll, so you can follow me on Twitter. I love to interact with people. I follow back, so follow me on there. Let's talk some football. And Bird, thank you so much for having me on, man. I really appreciate this. And we have got to get you on Shoals Sports Talk to break down a few of these Auburn matchups here sooner rather than later, buddy.
Oh, yeah, always happy to do that. It's a lot of fun. And once again, you can find me. This is on Twitter at Autull, Autull, on Sports Hacks at sportshacks.com. I write a column occasionally and have this podcast, the SEC Yesterday and Today, put up on there on Sports Hacks every Friday morning. And so we appreciate your listening, and we want you to be sure to take care out there and love your neighbor.